Saturday, May 1st, 2010, 6:30 p.m., New York City. A dark green Nissan Pathfinder with tinted windows was idling near the corner of 45th and 7th Avenue in the heart of Times Square, right in front of the Minskoff Theatre housing the Lion King musical. The engine was on, and the hazard lights were blinking. At first, it looked like the driver had just stepped away for a moment, but minutes passed, and still no one came back. Times Square was packed like any Saturday evening. Billboards flickered with endless advertisements. Tourists watched street performers gleefully while snapping pictures for social media posts. The city was pulsing with life. Mixed in with the bustling crowd were hustling street vendors, doing whatever they could to make the most of the Saturday evening rush. But 56-year-old veteran and t-shirt vendor Lance Orton wasn't focused on getting customers. He was focused on the Nissan Pathfinder parked beside his stall, now with smoke seeping out of the slits of the rear trunk. Just 8 feet away, 58-year-old handbag vendor Dwayne Jackson also saw the vehicle. A veteran himself, Jackson knew that anything could turn from insignificant to terrible in no time. So he decided to take a closer look and peered through the window. No one was inside, but he saw a key still in the ignition that was attached to around 20 more keys. He also noticed that the backseat windows were actually painted black, not tinted, preventing anyone from seeing inside. Everything about it screamed danger. Jackson and Orton frantically waved down a nearby officer who began examining the suspicious vehicle. When he looked in, smoke began rising from a vent near the backseat. Inside the car, tanks, canisters, a metal box. Then, sharp popping sounds rang out, followed by the unmistakable smell of gunpowder. That was when people started running away. All stalls with t-shirts, handbags, and souvenirs bearing "I love New York" were abandoned within seconds. The officer called for backup. Fire trucks arrived quickly, the bomb squad moved in, and police evacuated people from the streets and surrounding buildings. Within minutes, Times Square, one of the liveliest places in New York, had turned into a ghost town. The NYPD and FBI moved quickly to neutralize the threat. The bomb squad broke the rear window of the Nissan Pathfinder and then used a robot to look inside. They found a mix of everyday items that, together, made a recipe for disaster. Behind the driver's seat were 2 containers, each holding gallons of gasoline and surrounded by M88 firecrackers. There were 3 tanks filled with propane, and beside these tanks was a metal box loaded with bags of fertilizer, as well as another device packed with more M88 firecrackers. Black powder and burnt electrical wires were scattered inside the car, likely remnants of the few firecrackers that had detonated. All of these components were wired to a timer made up of 2 alarm clocks, both of which were brightly colored and deceptively looked more like a child's toy than a tool for the destruction of innocent human lives. Slowly, carefully, they disassembled it, piece by piece. Luckily, nothing was set off, but the danger was far from over, and their work had just begun. After inspecting it, NYPD Bomb Squad Supervisor Kevin Berry said the bomb hadn't gone off because the ignition source failed to function the main charge. Or in other words, the cheap timers and their faulty wiring failed to ignite the rest of the M88 firecrackers, which were supposed to detonate the canisters and tanks. Deputy Commissioner Paul Brown later confirmed that the vehicle was, in fact, a VBIED, or Vehicular-Borne Improvised Explosive Device. In his words, a car bomb, a crude device that includes gasoline, propane, and is wired together. Similar to the 1995 Oklahoma bombing, where a Gulf War veteran parked a rental truck in front of a federal building full of explosives. It killed 168 people, including 19 children. Several hundred more were injured. A third of the building was reduced to rubble, and 300 more buildings were damaged. Commissioner Raymond Kelly explained the car bomb in Times Square might have set off a significant fireball and a lot of shrapnel within a 1-block radius. He said, "We were lucky that it didn't detonate, but the danger was not over while the bomber was still on the loose. Whoever planted this device could strike again, and the next time, they might not be so lucky." So the hunt for the Times Square bomber began. The FBI, NYPD, and Homeland Security worked around the clock to identify the bomber. No eyewitnesses they interviewed saw who left the car there, so they reviewed hours of CCTV footage and tourist videos to track the car's movements before and after it was abandoned. With the number of cameras recording in Times Square, there must have been at least one that captured the bomber's face, or at the very least, the direction in which they fled. It was tedious work, and they knew they were on the clock. The whole city was already on edge. And then, the threats started to come in. 9 hours after the incident, at 4 a.m. the next morning, a 911 call came from a payphone near 7th Avenue, only 8 blocks away from where the Nissan almost exploded. The caller claimed that last night's attack was only a diversion, and a deadlier, more devastating explosion was on the way. It may have been a heartless prank, or perhaps it was the terrorists themselves. Regardless, it was unsettling, and it had to be taken seriously. The need to find this individual was more pressing than ever. Hours later, Taliban, also known as the Pakistani Taliban, released 3 videos claiming responsibility for the recent attack in the USA. They also warned that members of theirs were already in the country, just waiting for the signal to hit another city in the days or weeks ahead. In response, the NYPD and the then mayor Michael Bloomberg dismissed these claims because there was no evidence linking the case to any terrorist group. Bloomberg explained, "There's one group of the Taliban that claims credit for everything, including traffic jams." That same day, Commissioner Raymond Kelly announced that a white male believed to be in his 40s was spotted acting suspiciously in Schubert Alley, less than a block away from where the Nissan Pathfinder was abandoned. The man had taken off his dark shirt, revealing a red shirt underneath. All the while, he kept glancing in the direction of the Nissan. A tourist from Pennsylvania came forward, believing he may have unknowingly filmed this suspect, but unfortunately, the timeline of the video didn't line up with the incident. Information was all over the place, which is often the case with events heavily covered by the media. The investigators were, understandably, very limited in the information they shared. Some news reports stated that a man was seen running away from the area and was initially considered a suspect. However, another news report stated he was just a witness who helped identify the car. With information lacking, the media and public couldn't help but form their own theories while all of this went on. Several news outlets were already comparing the attack to Al-Qaeda's past operations, like the 2 linked attempts 3 years earlier in 2007. On June 29th, 2 car bombs were discovered outside of London nightclubs and disarmed before they could hurt anybody. The next day, a car full of propane tanks rammed into a Scottish airport and caught fire. Luckily, nobody was killed in either incident. But for this attack, the question on everyone's minds was, why? Some suspected that the car bomb was in response to, of all things, a cartoon. South Park had recently released 2 episodes depicting the Prophet Muhammad in a bear costume, earning significant backlash and death threats from an extremist group. Viacom, which owned the station that aired South Park, had their offices in the tower above the Minskoff Theatre where the car was parked, leading some to speculate that it was the intended target. Compelling as it was, this theory lacked evidence to back it up. Meanwhile, investigators relied on physical clues and forensic methods to fill in the gaps that witness statements couldn't, and little by little, they began to piece together what happened. They focused on the car and bomb components. First, it was sent to a forensic center for fibers, hair, and fingerprints, which yielded nothing. Then, it was sent to the FBI laboratory. They quickly realized the bomb was poorly made. Even if the timer worked as intended, the firecrackers were nowhere near strong enough to ignite the components, and the fertilizer meant to set off other components had been the wrong type. They were lucky the bomber didn't know what they were doing, but that didn't mean they wouldn't learn from their mistakes. One of the next things they did was check the license plate. Unsurprisingly, its records didn't match the Nissan. It was registered to a Ford truck, which was later found in a junkyard near Bridgeport. The vehicle identification number, or VIN, was also removed from the Pathfinder's dashboard. The bomber had made sure to cover their tracks. But luckily, they apparently didn't know that other parts of the car had VIN numbers, like the engine block and the axles. Using the VIN, investigators were able to track down the Pathfinder's last registered owner, who had given the car to his 19-year-old daughter. They went to interview her, and as it turned out, the daughter had wanted to sell the Pathfinder to upgrade her car, and had posted online ads in April 2010, a month before the bombing. According to her, around mid-April, she received a call from a man who was interested in buying the car, but didn't want to give his name. Weird? Sure, but she still agreed to meet at a supermarket parking lot in Connecticut so he could test drive the car. The buyer, a Middle Eastern man, arrived in a black Isuzu Rodeo. As is the case when selling a car, the seller tried to disclose any mechanical problems. However, the buyer was more interested in the seats and cargo space. After the test drive, he agreed to buy the car for $1,300, paid in full $100 bills. The buyer refused a bill of sale, explaining that he already had a license plate. She didn't think much of it at the time, since he had already paid for the car. She gave him the key, shook his hand, and watched as he drove off in his new Pathfinder. Unfortunately, without a bill of sale, he kept his name a secret till the end. But it wasn't all a loss. The seller was able to provide both the buyer's mobile number and physical description for a composite sketch. In no time, investigators traced the number to a prepaid account. It was activated on April 16th and hadn't been used since April 28th. While active, the prepaid account made some notable calls. Some of the calls were the seller of the Nissan Pathfinder. Another was with a firecracker store in Pennsylvania, known for selling commercial-grade M88s, like the ones found in the Pathfinder. And 4 calls were with a number in Pakistan that was associated with a man named Faisal Shahzad, who just so happened to fit the description given by the woman who sold the car. So by Sunday night, 24 hours after the attempt, Faisal Shahzad was identified as the car bomber. They had to assume that Shahzad had already begun the next stage of his plan. Overnight, Faisal Shahzad emerged as a top priority for all branches of law enforcement, considered among the most dangerous people in the nation. But when they looked into his past, what they found was surprising. Faisal Shahzad was born in Pakistan to Bahal-Ulaq, a decorated pilot who rose in the ranks from a common airman to vice marshal in the Pakistani Air Force. As the son of a senior military officer, Shahzad grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege, complete with servants, chauffeurs, and armed guards who protected his family. Despite having access to the best military-run schools, he didn't do well academically. Even with underwhelming grades, he was accepted as an exchange student to the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut in 1999. During this time, Shahzad still enjoyed a semblance of the sheltered life he left behind in Pakistan. He drove a Mitsubishi Galant and had a big television in his dorm room, luxuries that most college students didn't have at that time. And when he was not studying, he could be found partying and surrounded by women. His classmates remembered him for his street smarts and not for his religious interests. Yet beneath the surface, resentment had started to grow. A friend recalled that in 2001, right after 9/11, Shahzad had said they had it coming. He had then gone on a rant about what he believed was a Western conspiracy to mistreat Muslims. But despite the growing resentment, it looked like Shahzad was genuinely trying to make a home in the US. After graduating, he got a job as a financial analyst, and in 2004, he married his Pakistani-American wife. He hosted barbecues and doted on his children, the picture of an everyday suburban life. But his gradual changes didn't go unnoticed by those who were close to him. He began praying 5 times a day, stopped drinking altogether, and started regularly visiting mosques around Stamford, Norwalk, and Bridgeport. He then sent an email to his friends where he expressed his distress over what he saw as the Western war with Islam. In the email, he wrote, "The crusade has already started against Islam and Muslims with cartoons of our beloved Prophet." In 2009, amidst financial and marital problems, Shahzad decided he had had enough of his life in the US. He quit his job, packed his bags, and left for Pakistan for good. While waiting at the airport, he gave his wife a choice to follow him. She didn't, and instead moved with her 2 children to Saudi Arabia, where her parents lived. Perhaps this was for the best. In Pakistan, he promised his father that he would start a new life by working in his family's farming business, and he did for a while. But obviously, he had other plans for his new life. As December 2009 rolled in, Shahzad left home with a promise to return later. But that was a lie. By 2010, he was back in New York and showed his true colors when he tried to take the lives of an untold number of innocent people. By May 3rd, FBI agents had located his current residence, a 2-bedroom rental property in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But when they arrived at the property, Shahzad wasn't there. FBI agents interviewed the landlord, who revealed that Shahzad had signed a 1-year lease but had only been in the apartment for 3 months. They tried to open the front door with one of the many keys found in the car. One of them worked, which finally linked him directly to the bomb. Investigators also searched the building's garage, which Shahzad had exclusive access to. Inside, they discovered fertilizers, fireworks, and other suspicious materials. Later that morning, while staking out the apartment, they saw Shahzad in person for the first time, coming home with bags of groceries. Finally, they had him, or at least They would have, if they had decided to arrest him at that moment. You see, perhaps overconfident, the FBI wanted to wait and observe, hoping he would lead them to potential allies and uncover other plots. So a team was sent to monitor his every movement, phone calls, and emails. By 12:30 p.m., Shahzad was added to the no-fly list, barring him from leaving the country, or so they thought. Then, in the late afternoon, Shahzad exited his residence, revved up his white Isuzu Trooper, and drove south. The surveillance team followed him closely, but if there's one thing you don't want to hit when following a suspect, it's traffic. And when they hit it, they lost him. The officers did everything they could to locate him again, but he had seemingly vanished. NYPD Commissioner Raymond Kelly said, "It happens. We prefer it doesn't happen." If there was one saving grace, it was that they knew that Shahzad was already on the no-fly list nationwide, and thus, not only was he barred from getting on any flight, authorities would be notified immediately if he tried. At least, that was how it was supposed to work. They expected to face many challenges, but a technical error was not one of them. As it turned out, airline reservation systems were significantly delayed in adding Shahzad's name to the no-fly list. That's why no alarms went off when, at around 7:30 p.m., Shahzad walked into the JFK airport and bought a ticket to Dubai, in cash, under his real name. With Flight Emirates 202 scheduled to depart from New York at 11 p.m., Shahzad worried that the authorities might show up in that 2.5-hour window as he sat there, waiting nervously. At any moment, an officer could appear and take away his freedom. As the time for boarding crept closer and closer, he could see freedom on the horizon. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Still no one. Shahzad couldn't help but constantly scan his surroundings, react to every noise, glance at every movement. He wondered, did that security officer just speak into his walkie-talkie while looking at him? Were undercover cops lurking nearby? But all his worries began to melt away when, at last, passengers were being ushered to board the plane. In a matter of minutes, the plane would take off, and he would be out of the country, a free man. Meanwhile, officers were trying everything they could to find Shahzad. They wondered if he had caught wind of the surveillance and was going to leave the country. And so, the TSA ordered an emergency full-scale check of passenger lists from every airline for the name Faisal Shahzad. It was tedious, and unfortunately, it took hours, time they didn't have. But then, at 10:40 p.m., a match was found. The bomber's name was on the passenger list of an Emirates flight bound for Dubai at JFK Airport, and it was about to take off. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, agents were deployed immediately. They bolted through the airport, with only minutes to reach Shahzad's gate. The worry was he might put the plane or passengers in danger, or at the very least, slip through their fingers. When they reached the gate, the plane's cabin door was just being closed shut. The agents ordered it open, walked through the aisles, and found Shahzad in his seat. He didn't fight them. He didn't cause problems. He simply said, "I was expecting you." When officials later located his Isuzu Trooper in the airport parking lot, they found a Kel-Tec 9mm pistol with several magazines of ammunition inside. If they found him before he entered the airport, things could have gone down very differently. And had they arrived just minutes later, Shahzad would have gotten away completely. For an unknown reason, after Shahzad was taken off the plane and it started to depart, it was ordered back. 2 additional suspects were taken off the flight and questioned, but let go. Then, all the passengers, their luggage, and the plane were screened before they were finally allowed to depart 7 hours later at 6:29 a.m. After 53 hours from start to finish, the hunt for the New York Times Square bomber was finally over. The New York mayor later remarked, "Clearly, the guy was on the plane and shouldn't have been. We got lucky." After he was arrested, Shahzad admitted to everything. He revealed how he made contact with the Pakistani Taliban online and how he received 5 days of bomb-making training during his last trip to Pakistan. The planning started when he came back to the US in February 2010. Shahzad received funds twice from 2 different contacts for a total of $13,000. He used the money to buy the Nissan Pathfinder, the materials for the bomb, and a 9mm pistol. He revealed that he had made a practice run with his white Isuzu the day before the attempted bombing. He drove through Times Square to stake out potential locations. Then he proceeded to park the white Isuzu several blocks away from Times Square to be used as a getaway vehicle the next day. On the evening of the planned attack, he drove the Nissan Pathfinder through Times Square loaded with his bomb, looking for a place to park. When he found a spot, he pulled in. He didn't reveal any specific target, such as Viacom, so it may have just been luck of the draw. But as he left, he blundered up again. He left the key for his getaway vehicle in the car bomb with the other keys, so he instead took the train home, back to Connecticut. Months after his arrest, a video of Shahzad surfaced on the Saudi-owned network Al Arabiya, in which he declared that his actions were meant to avenge Muslim fighters. On June 21, 2010, over a month after the bombing attempt, Shahzad was convicted of 10 charges, and he pleaded guilty to all of them. Several of Shahzad's facilitators in Pakistan were also arrested, including Mohammad Rahan, who allegedly linked him to the Pakistani Taliban, and Tawhid Ahmed, detained due to suspicious correspondence. 5 other unnamed individuals were also arrested in connection to the incident. Meanwhile, the man changing his shirt on the surveillance video was cleared. During the sentencing, Manhattan U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara described Shahzad as a remorseless terrorist who betrayed his adopted country and today was rightly sentenced to spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Shahzad is currently serving his life sentence in the USP Florence Admex Penitentiary. In the end, justice was served, but the weight of what could have been still lingers. That's why the Times Square bombing attempt led to major security updates, such as how airlines must now update no-fly lists in real time to prevent unauthorized boarding. Had the device worked as intended, Times Square could have become a scene of unimaginable horror. A month later, a simulation done in Pennsylvania was enough to show how devastating the results could have been. Dwayne Jackson, one of the street vendors who reported the car, later reflected, "Now that I saw the propane tank and the gasoline, what if that would have ignited? I'm less than 8 feet away from the car. We dodged a bullet there." Lance Orton left wise words to his fellow New Yorkers. See something? Say something. The case proved that even with the best start, things could go wrong in an instant. Despite this, all the parties involved never gave up and succeeded in the end. But what if the internet decided to join a manhunt like this? Find out in our video on the Boston Marathon bombers, where online detectives turned a tragedy into a digital manhunt gone wrong.